So welcome everybody. I'm Kristen Lays. I'm the Executive Director of Belgrove Plantation, and we're delighted to co-host this event this evening with the Museum of the Shenandoah Valley. Both our museums are sites of museums participating in a program called Blue Star Museums, which is a program from Blue Star Families, Department of Defense, and the National Endowment for the Arts that is promoting museums to military families and hoping to help families make some good summertime memories. So between Armed Forces Day in May and Labor Day in September, museums who are part of this program agreed to offer free admission to active military and their families. And so Belgrove is doing this for the first time this year. The Museum of the Shenandoah Valley has done it for several years, and we're just delighted to offer this to our servicemen and women. So one of Belgrove's board members, Autumn Wallachira, had a wonderful suggestion to invite her colleague, Phillip Brashear, to join us and to give a talk tonight. And we're so delighted that they are with us. I'm going to turn it over to Autumn to give a brief introduction, and then Mr. Brashear has an introduction of his own and then his presentation. So thank you again for joining us this evening. We're so delighted you're here. Autumn?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Autumn Wallachira, and I'd like to introduce a colleague of mine, Phillip Brashear, Chief Warrant Officer 5. He's here this evening to discuss the legacy of his father, Carl Brashear. Really looking forward to getting some really great information. And again, Phil, I'd like to thank you again for having this talk for us this evening.
No problem. I guess it's on me right now. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you so much, Autumn and Kristen. I see Kristen's background, and I tell you, I would love to be where she is right now, nice and sunny up in Northern Virginia, because down here in Richmond, we just got over the rain. And my friend Autumn, who I work with for the government, she is such a wonderful joy to be around. I always pick with her and tease her, but she is my little sister. I'm not old enough to be her dad, but she is my little sister, and I love being around her. She's a great person. So in order to get started, I do have a short introductory video, and I'm not so egotistical I make videos about myself, but because of who I am, the Navy decided to do a short introductory video just so I could use it for presentations like tonight. So I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to start the video, and after the video, I'll start the presentations. Now, Kristen gave me a heads up on how to do this, so I want to make sure I do it right. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and I'll start with the video. Stand by.
Born into a proud military family, Army Chief Warrant Officer Phillip Brashear is the third son of late Navy Master Chief Carl Brashear, the first African-American U.S. Navy diver, whose courageous life story was detailed in the 2000 motion picture Men of Honor. Inspired by his father's legacy, Brashear proudly served his country for more than 40 years. A graduate of IC Norcom High School, Brashear was awarded an athletic scholarship to Old Dominion University, where he competed on the school's wrestling team for a year before making the decision to forge his own path in the military. Brashear enlisted in the U.S. Navy Reserve in 1981, where he served as a jet engine mechanic and helicopter crewman at the Naval Air Station in Norfolk, Virginia. While Brashear enjoyed being part of the aircrew, it had always been his dream to become a pilot. But without a college degree, he was not eligible for Navy pilot training. However, much like his father before him, Phillip was determined to accomplish his goal. In 1989, he made a blue to green shift. After being accepted to the Army's Warrant Officer program and completing initial rotary wing training in 1991, he became a Warrant Officer pilot in the Virginia Army National Guard. Serving with the Army National Guard for almost 2 decades, Brashear retired in November 2007 after a strenuous deployment to Iraq and his father's passing. Less than 2 years later, Brashear decided he still had more to give his country. Inspired by his late father's famous words, "It's not a sin to get knocked down, it's a sin to stay down." He returned to the military, joining the Army Reserve in 2009 and serving as a rear detachment commander for Bravo and Delta companies of the 5 159th General Support Aviation Battalion located at Fort Eustis, Virginia. A master aviator with more than 2,600 flight hours, Chief Brashear spent most of his military career flying helicopters, including the Vietnam helicopter UH-1 Huey, 2 different models of the UH-60 Black Hawk as a maintenance test pilot, and 2 different models of the CH-47 Chinook. He has flown humanitarian missions to Bolivia, deployed to Bosnia as part of Task Force Eagle, and to Iraq as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom. Today, Brashear is a Command Chief Warrant Officer with the 80th Training Command. A top technical expert for his command, he invests much of his time serving as an advisor to his commanding general and as a mentor to fellow warrant officers and soldiers. Outside of the military, Brashear works as a Department of Defense civilian at the Defense Logistics Agency in Richmond, Virginia, and serves as the president of the Carl Brashear Foundation, a nonprofit organization not only dedicated to inspiring future generations through sharing the incredible life story of Carl Brashear, but also working with veterans hospitals across the country to rehabilitate the lives of wounded service members. Together with his wife Sandra, Brashear has 3 daughters, Tia, Megan, and Melanie, and a son, Tyler, who is carrying on the family's proud military heritage as an Army ROTC cadet at North Carolina A&T University.
Okay. Did that come across okay, everybody?
We heard it wonderfully, but unfortunately the video didn't play. But so I'm so sorry, but
Okay.
it sounded wonderful and we learned a lot.
All right.
So I know you've got some visuals coming up next for us.
Yes. Let me make sure I do this correctly. Okay, for everybody, can you see the video? Can you see the presentation?
Perfect.
Oh, okay. Well, at least you got to hear the video that played before, and I'm glad you heard that. That's a short introduction to who I am. Sometimes I wonder who that person is, but I guess I did do some things in my 40 years of service. I try to stay real modest and low key about it, but 40 years is a lot of time. But I would like to share the story about my father, and I call this a legacy of motivation. My father was the late Master Chief Master Diver Carl Brashear, born in rural Kentucky to a sharecropper family. And to get off the farm at the age of 17 with barely an 8th grade education, he joined the Navy in 1948, months after President Harry Truman desegregated the military so that all people of all races could join. Now, I always talk about my father, and I say that there's 5 hurdles that he had to overcome to become the person he was. Well, starting off joining the military at the age of 17, coming from a sharecropper family, he had 3 things against him already, 3 hurdles that he had to overcome. He had to overcome the racism that was prevalent during that time. He had to overcome the fact that he was poor, coming from a sharecropper family. His family didn't own the land. They worked the land for the person who owned the land and just took a percentage, a small percentage of the crops from the field. The third thing my father started off his career is the fact that he was illiterate. At the age of 17, with barely an 8th grade education from a rural school, he wasn't quite the educated person going into the military that he needed to be to succeed. So those are 3 hurdles that he had to overcome just starting off. Any of those 3 things could have discouraged him from continuing on, but my father didn't. Racism, poverty, illiteracy. But he did join the Navy, and during that time, Black men that joined the Navy could only be cooks or stewards for officers. So he didn't have much of a career path to look forward to once he joined the Navy. Now, what my father did do, he was exposed to Navy divers off the coast of Florida near Key West. And when he saw those divers doing their work in the water, strapping planes and pulling down planes out of the water onto the ships, he was so motivated that he wanted to become a diver. Of course, during the time there were not any African-American divers, but he wanted to be one so bad that he submitted hundreds of letters until they finally admitted him to diving school in 1952. And here's a picture of my father at his graduation class in 1954 after successfully completing dive school. If you look at that picture, it's not hard to pick out where my father is over to the right-hand side in the back. Now, my father became a diver in 1954, started his qualifications to become more and more successful in the diving ranks, because as a diver in the Navy, you have to go out and you have to commit yourself to making many dives and getting as well trained as possible. In 1966, though, his life changed. 2 Air Force planes collided off the coast of Spain. One of those planes had nuclear weapons on board. 2 were dropped on land. 1 was dropped in the ocean right off the coast of Spain. My father was assigned to a dive team to retrieve these bombs, because in international waters, anybody could have retrieved those bombs and kept it for themselves. But of course, America didn't want its secrets to be disclosed, so the Navy sent a dive team there to get it. During the course of that operation in 1966, on board the ship, my father suffered his 4th hurdle. There was a shipboard incident where some rigging came loose and a pipe was slung across the deck of a ship, and it nearly tore my dad's leg off. In fact, it was such a gruesome incident that he said he only had pieces of flesh that was holding his leg together while he laid on ship as people attended to him. And during that time also, he was pronounced dead 3 times because of the massive loss of blood. So the 4th hurdle that my father had to overcome to be the celebrated Navy man that he is was his physical disability, because later on they had to amputate that leg. Here's an actual picture of my dad at the Portsmouth Naval Hospital after his leg was amputated. At the time, the Navy wanted to go ahead and retire my father because they figured he was handicapped, he wouldn't be any good to the Navy, and that he could go on home and raise his family best he could with the amputation that he had to deal with. But my father did not want to retire. He did not want to be considered handicapped. So what he did, he worked out and developed himself until he was able to maneuver with that 300-pound diving suit. Here's an actual picture of my father showing and demonstrating to the Navy Review Board, Medical Review Board, that he could indeed still function as a Navy diver despite the loss of the lower part of his left leg. He had to do all kinds of calisthenics, all kinds of weightlifting, all kinds of demonstrations to show that he was capable. Because like I said before, that Navy dive suit weighed 300 pounds. So here he is climbing a ladder with weights on his back to keep his body in shape and in tune. One thing I would like to point out though, if you notice, he's doing this with dress shoes, weights on his back in dress shoes, because the photographers want to actually catch him in action. But to me, this is a safety violation in itself. The man is climbing a ladder stairwell with weights on his back and dress shoes. Had those dress shoes slipped and my dad fallen and hurt himself, what would the Navy have done? Here you got a man fighting for his career, but having to demonstrate that he is still capable with some of these things going on as far as improper footwear to be doing the maneuver that he's doing right now. And just keep an eye on this because it gets worse. Here's my father. Of course, like I said, he had to lift weights. He had to keep his body in shape on a slippery wood floor with a flimsy mat in dress shoes, lifting weights over his head. To me, that's an OSHA violation waiting to happen. And I don't care what color you are, to demonstrate this type of agility and this type of strength under the conditions that he had to face. Now, remember, my father didn't have years to prepare. This was days and weeks after he had his leg amputated. So despite having to prove to the Navy that he could do it, can you imagine the pain that he still was dealing with because he had just had his leg amputated? I'm sure that bone didn't heal right away and he had to deal with it in order to prove to the Navy that he could still do it. He didn't want to show any pain. He didn't want to show any fear, but I'm sure while he was demonstrating to the Navy that he was still capable, he was feeling a lot of pain because like I said, his leg was just amputated days before this demonstration. Here's one of the worst pictures I could show you. Weights over his neck, climbing a metal stairwell in dress shoes. Had my father slipped and fall during this demonstration, what would the Navy have done? They would have had no choice but to dismiss him because of further injury. But my father was so determined to prove to the Navy that he was capable that he endured this. Eventually, they did get back to more of a sensible type of example of what he could do. He lost the bottom part of his left leg below the knee, so they wanted to show, and he wanted to show them that he had knee flexibility, that he was capable of moving his knee. So riding this stationary bicycle proved to the Navy that yes, he did have some dexterity, and he did have movement of the bottom part of his leg because he still had his knee. Even though he had to take his pants off to show that, he still had his shirt and tie on, but he proved it nonetheless. And like I said, to stay in shape, you have to run, you have to do some kind of aerobic activity. My father in his tennis shoes out on the highway at the Norfolk Naval Base, running, staying in shape, to the point where they finally had to give him his diving status back because he proved to the world, not just the Navy, that he was still capable of continuing on, which made him kind of famous throughout the Navy realm. Not to the world yet, but definitely in the Navy, he made a legacy for himself because he did manage to get his life back and became a full-fledged diver in the Navy. Now, I talk about the 5 hurdles. We already went over the first 4: racism, poverty, illiteracy, physical disability. Before my father finally retired from the Navy in 1979, he had to submit himself to the Navy alcohol abuse course. You know, it takes courage to admit that you've got a problem. And my father did have a drinking problem. But before he retired, he wanted his record to be clean and he didn't want any kind of bad marks against him. So he submitted himself to the Navy substance abuse course for alcohol, went through the course and passed. So in 1979, when my father retired, he had no blemishes on his record. And again, he proved to the world that with courage and belief in yourself, there's nothing you can't accomplish. There's nothing that you can't do. But I'm sure he didn't want to admit that he had a problem. But you know, through life, we all have some kind of issues that we have to deal with. He admitted that he had his with drinking. So the 5 hurdles that I say that my father overcame to become the celebrated diver that he is racism, poverty, illiteracy, physical disability, and in today's society, I just put drug and alcohol abuse together. 5 things that affected the country then, 5 issues that still affect the country today, 5 things that still affect every country in the world. Think about it: racism, poverty, illiteracy, physical disability, and drug and alcohol abuse. 5 things that still affect us today. But I can tell you right now, my father passed away July 25th, 2006. He held no grudges against anyone for the way he was treated, and he died with a smile on his face. But look at what he overcame to be the person that he was. Now, this country has all kinds of great people that we've developed and that we know about. You know, I look at people like George Washington. George Washington was a white aristocrat. He didn't have any physical disabilities. He may have had wooden teeth that I hear, but he didn't have a wooden leg. Well-educated, came from money. People like Abraham Lincoln, well-educated, became the 16th president of the United States. He didn't have any physical disabilities. Now, I'm not trying to say that my father was greater than these men, but just look at what he had to come through to make it to where he was. Martin Luther King came from a middle-income family, well-educated, became one of the great civil leaders of the 1960s. But like I said, my father had to overcome 5 things that still affect our country today and still made a name for himself in this world. So my advice to you is never let anything stop you. You know, what God has for you is for you, and there's nobody or anything that can stand in your way. My father is a living example of that. Now, after he retired in 1979, there were all kinds of movie deals that were trying to be made, but it wasn't until 1995 when my father met a man named Stan Robertson, who was a colleague of then Dr. Bill Cosby. Dr. Bill Cosby heard about my father's story and got with Fox Studios, and they started preparing for the movie Men of Honor to be released in 2000. So Dr. Bill Cosby is the one person responsible for having my dad's story brought to the Hollywood movie screen. He is the exec producer of Men of Honor, and he's the reason why the movie came out. And there's my father, the late Master Chief Master Diver Carl Brashear, who passed away, leaving a great legacy for all of us to imitate. He did not let anything stand in his way. His belief in God and belief in himself motivated him to be the person he is. Now he's world famous because of what he stood for and the things that he believed in, and also the things that he accomplished. I was in Iraq in 2006 when I got the Red Cross message that my father was critically ill. So I leave a combat environment, flying helicopters in Iraq, get to the Portsmouth Naval Hospital, and I walked into my father's room. And let me share this with you. I walked into my father's room at the Portsmouth Naval Hospital complaining about how hot it was in Iraq, about the conditions that I was under, about the death that I seen. But my dad looked up from his hospital bed. Me not even knowing that it was his deathbed, he looked up at me and said, "Son, what are you complaining about?" So I always tell the story that my father taught me a great life lesson to never complain about anything, because I came back from combat duty in Iraq serving my country, but he was on his deathbed and died 5 days later after I got back from Iraq. So that just goes to show, and that's just also a bit of motivation that you should never complain about anything, because there's always somebody who has it worse than you. I'm sure during that time when I came to visit my father before he passed away, he would have traded places with me in a heartbeat, to be young, strong, flying helicopters to serve my country. But I can look at each one of you in the eyes right now and tell you I wouldn't have traded places with him, because he looked so frail and so pitiful. And like I said, 5 days after I returned from Iraq, he died in my arms right there at the Portsmouth Naval Hospital, July 25th, 2006. And here's a picture of us at his funeral. After the 30 days of leave, after my dad passed away and we got all his effects together, I had to return back to Iraq to finish my Iraq tour. I got a chance to do celebrity flying like you see here with Chuck Norris. Before I was put back into combat duty, they let me kind of like take it easy and just fly some VIP missions, which I did. And it was pretty exciting flying people like that around. I had a good time with it. But I did finish my Iraq tour and came back home, and I actually retired from the Army National Guard. But I will tell you this, after my retirement, a few months after I got kind of used to being retired, I was going through my father's things, and I realized, and it hit me, that my father never quit a thing in his life. Just because I retired, because I had a hard time doing Iraq and my father passed away, I gave up. But it's not meant for us to give up. You should never give up. I had more to give. So a year later, after I retired, I joined back into the Army Reserve and continued flying helicopters, which you see a picture of here out of Fort Eustis, Virginia. Because you should never let life dictate to you. You dictate to life. Just because I had a hard time didn't give me the right to quit. And I had more to give. And had I not got back into the Army Reserves, I wouldn't be where I am today. And where I am today is a CW5. I got promoted one last time to CW5, which is the highest rank ever as a warrant officer. I've got a great job as the Command Chief Warrant Officer right here at the Defense Supply Center in Richmond, which is where my reserve base is. And had I quit then, I wouldn't be right now 1 year out of retiring for good when I turned 60 of July 2022. So that just goes to show that my father motivated me and kept my life going. In certain aspects of his life where he was a champion should motivate you. Never give up, never quit anything. Now that's the end of my video and presentation, but I just want to share with you that, you know, God puts these people on our planet for us to emulate. He makes an example of meekest of us, the mild of us, to show that his power is great. So if my father could be molded by God to be an example for all of us to emulate, then each one of us has that same capability. God could use all of us to do great works and to show others that what he has in store for us is for us, and that nobody can take it away. So with that, Miss Kristen and Autumn and fellow members on this panel, that's my presentation, and I'm open for questions. And I hope I didn't bore you, because Mr. Clancy has some vices on that wall behind him. I don't want to get in trouble, Mr. Clancy.
I don't think you will. That was really inspirational. Thank you. And I hope we have some great questions. I know I have a few of my own, but if you all want to take turns and unmute yourself, it would be wonderful to hear some of your questions.
I will tell you while people are getting their questions together, the movie Men of Honor, you see Robert De Niro's character, and I will tell you that Robert De Niro's actual character is 3 different people throughout my dad's career. But in Hollywood, you'll never kick Robert De Niro out of a movie, so they carried his character all the way through.
So that was actually one of my questions is, so that's fascinating. Did your father and your family feel that the movie rang true to his experience?
Yes, maybe they didn't show all of the violent scenes because there were fights, you know, racial fights and whatnot that my father endured. It really didn't have to go into all of that, but those things did happen. But I always tell people that the bottom line of that movie is that's whatever is for you is for you. So I use that as a motivational type of experience. Of course, they showed racism and where my father came from, but I would tell you this. If you notice during the movie, even though Robert De Niro's character didn't like him, he learned to respect him and eventually became friends. So in today's society, we can use that same message. If you get to know somebody, you never know what you may have in common. And out of that friendship, out of that respect, can lead to other things. And I think we need a whole lot more of that in this world today.
I'm going to read a question aloud from Amy. And she said, have you written a book, or did your father ever write an autobiography?
No, the book is about the movie Men of Honor, and I've never written a book myself, but there is one in the making that I'm working with some folks on the foundation that we are going to do a semi biography of my dad that'll be released in the next year or two.
That's wonderful.
Yes.
That's great. Thanks, Amy, for that question.
While we're waiting for another question, I will say also in the movie, they show my parents just meeting. My parents grew up together in rural Kentucky, and my mother wasn't a doctor, but what they were trying to portray was the fact that my mother did have more education than my father. She did go to community college in rural Kentucky before my parents got married. So in the movie, even though my mother wasn't actually a doctor, they were just trying to show the difference in education. My mother was well educated for the time.
Did your father speak of his experiences as he, in those early years in the integrated Navy?
Oh, you know, to be honest with you, I learned more about my father when the movie came out. He never brought those issues home. And being a military family, we were always in integrated environments. So I never knew, you know, the difference between black and white as far as the racial strife that was going on during that time. And my father never brought it home. I didn't learn about it until I was much older in high school, to where there were issues between races of people. But up until then, I was pretty sheltered.
Mm-hmm.
When did you come to understand his legacy? When did it hit you?
Autumn, to be honest with you, I knew my father was a great man. Growing up as a kid, he would take us to the military bases, and I would see when he came around how people kind of ducked and hid because my dad was such an awesome figure and he was in charge. So people would go hiding. So I figured, man, my dad must be a big deal. But Autumn, I would tell you, at 38 years old in the year 2000, when that movie came out, I learned more about my dad then than I ever did, because he never talked about his experiences. I just remember going to the military bases with him, being a little kid and following him around. But I never knew that my father went through so much until I actually saw it. And growing up with my father having one leg, well, I will tell you this, in the neighborhood, my dad could do more than the other fathers could because he was in such great shape. So him having a amputated leg wasn't even a factor. I paid no attention to it.
If you have any questions, you're welcome to put it in the chat, or you can unmute yourself. I wondered if you could talk a little bit more about the Carl Brashear Foundation and the work that you all do.
When my father passed away, there were all kinds of people sending me money. And I was talking to my wife, I'm like, what am I supposed to do with all this money? So my cousin in Atlanta, Georgia, Ron Brashear, said, Philip, start a foundation and give that money away and honor your father to different charities. So I did the IRS paperwork. It flew straight through. I became a 501c3 nonprofit organization, Carl Brashear Foundation. And what I've been doing with the money, I've been giving $1,000 checks to different VA hospitals in my father's name. Now, we're not a multi-million-dollar foundation, but I have been able to give about a dozen checks away to different VA hospitals throughout the country. So I've been able to do that in my father's name, and it keeps his legacy alive, and I feel good about that.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Anyone else?
I have a question.
Okay.
Hi, I don't even know how to address you, Mr. Brashear, but I have been working with Kristen at Belle Grove, getting this all set up. I'm emailing tons of people, getting the information out to them yesterday and today. And my brother's watching with me, and he's a very big military family. We grew up as military children. And my brother wanted to know specifically about you, how many tours of duty you were on.
Well, I have been on 3 tours of duty with the Army National Guard and Army Reserves to the places that they talked about on my video. I did a humanitarian mission in Bolivia, South America, which was wonderful. I mean, got to be out with the natives, and Bolivia is a beautiful country. The mountains and the deserts, and the plateaus, it was wonderful. And then I did do the Bosnia rotation, where it was right after the Civil War, and we were there as a stabilization force to keep the Civil War and the mass attacks down. And then, of course, in 2005, I was deployed to Iraq, and that was a big one. I was exposed to so much I've never seen before in my life. It was pretty horrendous. I've never seen some of the things that I saw on that Iraq deployment. It's something, but you got to have faith. You can't go over there and not believing in something, because you get exposed to a lot. And of course, you've probably heard stories about what goes on in Iraq and what was going on during the war and things that are still going on. It hasn't changed.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your service to our country. We are a grateful nation.
Well, thank you.
We have another question from Amy. Do you mind talking a little bit more about your life growing up in a military family? What was your family like? She said, can you tell us about your mom and dad, some things we might not know about them?
Sure. I would tell you that my father had a great sense of humor. And being a military brat, there was 4 of us. I had 2 older brothers. One passed away in 1996, and I have a younger brother. But I'm the biggest one in the family, and I'll share this story with you. Back when I was about 15, my dad stood 5'9", but I was already hitting 6 feet, and right now I'm almost 6'4". So I grew to be taller than my dad right around the age of 15. And I remember picking with my dad one day, and I said, "Dad, how come I'm so tall and you so short?" And he looked up at me and said, "Son, before you came along, I was out to sea a lot, so you better go ask your mother." So he had his own way of putting me in my place of being a little smart aleck. But my dad had a great sense of humor. My mom, I just think the reason they got divorced right before my dad retired is that they just grew apart. My dad was always getting deployed and always going on cruises. And of course, my mom was home raising us. And I think they just grew apart. That's what ended to their divorce, and also my dad's drinking. But I had a great childhood. I had both parents there. I knew them. I spent time with both of them, and I couldn't ask for a better childhood. It was awesome. And plus, I was the only kid in the neighborhood who had actual flippers and snorkels and masks that was Navy issued. So we would go out to the local lakes and go swimming. I had all the official stuff, so I was like the cool kid with all the great stuff.
That is a great story.
Mm-hmm.
George wondered if you had any plans to teach or do JROTC or teach at a military college after you retire officially again.
Wow. To be honest with you, I haven't even thought of that. I guess I could. When I retire a year from now, hopefully I'll still have lots of energy like I do now. I'll be 60, and maybe I can get into something like that. I never even thought about that. That's a great question. But Yeah, I'm full, and Autumn can tell you, I'm full of energy. I'm never quiet or in a dull moment. So I'm always ripping and running. So if I feel this way next year when I retire, I'll look up, I'll look into doing something like that. That'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, George. I think that's a great idea too.
Mhm.
You could be a natural. Did you ever have an inclination to go follow your father's flipper steps, I'd say, and go into diving?
Well, if you notice, and if you heard in the biography, I did join the Navy Reserve, but my interest was always in aviation.
Mhm.
I used to joke with my dad. I said, Dad, I scored higher on the ASVAB when I became a pilot. I said, I scored higher on the ASVAB test. I go up, not down. My dad used to say, oh, get out of my face, son. You just remember this, you little smart aleck. There'll always be a diver looking for a pilot. There'll never be a pilot looking for a diver.
Yep, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Sally's got a question. How can folks support military families today? Are there challenges to military families that they face now that you didn't experience when you were growing up?
No, I think it's pretty much the same. The biggest challenge to the military family is the constant moving, and it still happens today. 2 or 3 years, you get settled, you get in a groove, you get in I guess, a good rut, and then all of a sudden the military moves you somewhere else, and it causes a lot of strife, it causes a lot of divorces, it causes a lot of separation, just causes a lot of stress on the family to just move every 2 or 3 years. Some families do great with that, but the constant picking up and moving, picking up and moving. Some families just don't adjust to that very well, and it causes a lot of issues, just like it did during the time when I was coming up. But I will tell you that my mother, at the time when my father was stationed in Norfolk, I grew up in Portsmouth, Virginia, and my mother said, "We bought the house here, and this is where we're going to stay. Carl, you go do your career wherever you need to do it." But she wanted to keep us stable, and I really thank my mom for that, because she told my dad, "I'm not going to keep moving. You do your career, but me and the kids are going to stay here," which kept me in a place for a long time growing up in Portsmouth, Virginia. And I really do thank my mother for that. That was a smart lady, and she kept me grounded and in that same situation, so I didn't have to keep moving all over the place.
Yeah, she does sound like a smart lady. Is she still living?
No, my mother passed away 5 years ago.
Oh.
And I will share this with you. There's not a day that goes by I don't think about the sacrifices that both my parents did. So I live my life in honor to them. You know, a lot of kids today, especially in today's society, they go out and they do crazy things. They don't realize that that name that was given to them by their parents, that they're actually their parents' representatives. So even at 58 years old, I think about when I go out here that I'm representing my mother and father, even though they're deceased. And then if I ever did anything wrong, it wouldn't be Phillip Brashear did this. It would be son of Carl Brashear. And I'm never going to put my parents in that situation. So I do walk a fine line because I feel it's showing respect to my parents.
Mhm. Absolutely. That's beautifully said. Yeah, absolutely.
Hello, may I ask Mr. Brashear a question?
Please go ahead. Thank you.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for this inspiring message. And as I was listening to what you said about, if you really want to do something, you can do it. It may take so much work, but your dad was such a marvelous example of that. And you are too. And I think that needs to be heard by young people. And I wonder if the high schools these days invite speakers in, and you could bring this program to them. The kids need to hear this. Would that be possible, or have you been approached by any educational institutions?
Ma'am, I will tell you, I have been invited to speak everywhere from the White House to get kindergarten classes. And I give the same message every time. The Pentagon, I've been all over, but I would love to spend more of my time instead of with senators and congressmen, with people a third of their age in the schools. That's why I really think the message needs to be taught. You know, it was fun being at the White House, telling my dad's story. It was fun, being at Congress, telling my dad's story, and some of the other places where you have celebrities and all that kind of stuff. And I enjoy that, but I think you are totally right that this message needs to be told
Yeah.
kids coming up in their formative years.
Well, thank you again for your service and for your dad and your whole family.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, I was going to say the same thing. I just listening to you has been such an inspiration. Your dad's story, your story, and I work with youth through my church, and I 100% agree. The kids in the schools these days need to hear a story like yours. You'd be a great motivational speaker.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I hear your dog applaud me too in the background.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I also just wanted to say how absolutely inspiring this is. It is such a story that I agree our young people need to hear. I have this vision. I live in Winchester in the city, and I have this vision that when the kids walk through Hanley High School, where they're so into the screens and videos, that there are TV screens, or if they're in the cafeteria playing on the TV screen are people like you. And I'll just say you, because your story does so much for people who need someone to believe in them. And maybe that someone that needs to believe in them is themselves. And so often when we hear the hardships that somebody's gone through and they just keep picking themselves up, and going, you realize that takes such strength, inner strength. And I don't know, I just think about so many kids out there that don't have the things that my kids had, for instance. And I say, they have it within them, or your story can help inspire them in so many ways to be good people. And I just wanted to say how grateful I am to you and to your parents' legacy, to who they were, to show you that way. So thank you for listening to your parents.
Well, I do have one thing I'd like to share, because I don't want anybody to think that I come from a perfect family. My oldest brother, I told you, he passed away in 1996. And all I remember growing up was, since he was 7 years older than me, was the fact that he always got in trouble, and he was always getting arrested, and he was always doing something against the law. He became a big drug dealer in the city of Portsmouth, Virginia. And in 1993, I think he went to prison because he had killed a guy over a drug deal. And he died of a massive heart attack in 1996. So that was my oldest brother. My brother next to him, my next older brother, he's a good looking one in the family. I mean, this guy, women fall out when they see him. So he left college after 3 years of studying and went off to New York to become a model. And to this day, at age 64, he still does commercial and model work because he looks so good. He's such a good looking guy. I can't stand him. My little brother kind of followed in the footsteps of my oldest brother, and he got into some legal problems and spent 17 years in prison. Now he's out now doing fine and getting himself together, but I don't want anybody to think I just come from a perfect family. I'm the only one that went to the military and did what I did, but every family has somebody who doesn't listen to the word that's being put out. I'm so glad I did, but I tell you what, if I was good looking enough, I probably would have followed my other brother's footsteps and been modeling, getting paid for looking good all these years. But I wasn't blessed with that. So I always tell people I just work. And Autumn can tell you, I just work. That's all I do.
Thank you for sharing so much about your family. I do still think that even that's an inspiration, that kids can go a lot of different ways. And
Yes.
And every child needs every advantage, whether economic or educational or inspirational,
Yes.
to guide them. Thank you. Other questions or comments? we wound up having a smaller group that actually came this evening, but I know a number of people by name who registered that I know or sorry to have to miss this. So we'll certainly be sharing this recording with everyone.
Okay.
And I know they'll really enjoy that.
Okay. Well, at some point, I would love to come up there and see that place in person. It looks beautiful, Kristen.
Thank you. Yeah, we would love to have you visit both our museums, Belle Grove and the Museum of Shenandoah Valley. And please do keep in touch and let us know. We'd be more than honored to show you
Okay,
sites.
good deal.
Okay, any last thoughts or questions this evening? Well, with that, I would like to again thank you, Mr. Brashear, for your help and bringing this wonderful message to us and wonderful inspirational talk. And for Autumn for making this happen, and for Sally for your help in partnering with us on this program.
Oh, okay. Can I say one more thing?
Absolutely.
He changed his mind.
For anybody who wants to learn more about my dad, there's videos, there's pictures, there's stories. www.carlbrashear.org, O-R-G, carlbrashear.org. And I've got videos and everything on that website. Like I said, all of this is just a tribute to my dad. There's no overhead that the foundation pays. I don't receive a dime. It all comes in and it all goes out. So if you get a chance, www.carlbrashear.org. You can learn more about my dad. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll share that along with a wonderful bio we have of you when we share out the recording with everybody.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Sally, did you have any last
I
words?
wanted to say thank you, Mr. Brashear. This was wonderful, and thanks to Kristen and Autumn for putting it together.
Oh,
It was
thank you.
good to work with Belle Grove.
Okay.
We've had some other thank yous coming in through the chat. Mary said thank you as well.
Okay.
And we hope that everyone has a wonderful and safe evening and a wonderful tomorrow.
All right. Thank you so much. I'll make sure Autumn buys me lunch next time I see her.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yes,
again. It was
Okay,
a wonderful
bye.
program.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.
Good
All
night,
right.
everyone.
Thank you so much.
Oh. Are they gonna? Hmm.